Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Sunday, April the 2nd session of the OBX Wave Report. I am Robert Scribbler, your reporter on all things waves, weather, climate, and the beach stuffs. And for today, on this Sunday, I must apologize if I am a little tired, but I've been very, very busy. I will do my best for all of you to keep the high energies. But for today, we're going to talk about sea ice. We're going to talk about the California drought. We're going to talk a little bit about clean energy. And we're also going to talk about the 1 to 3 foot waves that are breaking across the Outer Banks in the wake of a very powerful storm system that sent tornadoes ripping through parts of the central US and kicked up a gale here in the Outer Banks yesterday. Today, we are in the wake of the storm system and we have beautiful, clear blue skies outside, brisk northerly and well, winds coming from the north. Now they're starting to shift more toward the northwest, and I believe over the evening time, it'll start to shift more and more to the west and calm down. But temperatures today cooler, highs in the middle to upper 50s, depending on where you are in the Outer Banks. But the warmth is set to continue starting tomorrow. So it's going to warm up tomorrow, warm up on Tuesday. And we're hopefully going to get out in the surf today and maybe get some good video for you. We'll see. We'll see how well I perform today. But in any case, nonetheless, we're definitely going to get into the water tomorrow and hopefully get some surf video for you guys and some practice sessions for improvement. My wife right now is in New Orleans. She's doing the Animal Care Expo. She works for an animal advocacy organization and is doing all the good work there now. So my thoughts are with her as she's on travel and got some other friends who are on travel as well, thoughts with them as well. And I'm just really hoping that as summer rolls along, we can get some friends together to get in the surf with us. I'm looking forward to the notion of possibly teaching more people how to surf. I've forgotten how much I enjoy it and um, just really looking forward to getting a good surf, beach, ocean, and I don't know, maybe climate action advocacy and clean energy advocacy group together here in the Outer Banks. I mean, love of the ocean can lead to good things, right? All right, so let's get into the preamble discussion for the OBX Wave Report. I didn't do a climate science chat this week, so bad on me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to focus for some of the episodes on climate science discussion for the preamble. I mean, I can do whatever I want with the format of this wave report, right? So, and if you guys like it, go ahead and give me some feedback, or if you just um, want me to separate the segments, let me know. Although I think combining the threads here is actually pretty cool. So I kind of have a preference for that. I'm going to start out with Zach Labe, really good guy. I watched him kind of come up through sea ice observations when he was first getting into climate science and then graduating from college, and one of the best Arctic observers that we have and very on point. And it is just very helpful to follow Zach Labe. The Arctic is one of the most sensitive regions to climate change, and it's very helpful to have a climatologist who's solely focused on observing the Arctic. And what we've got from Zach is the most recent data now from March, in which Arctic sea ice extent was the sixth lowest on record, and you can see the graph for Arctic sea ice over recent years, running from looks like 1980, I believe, is the start of the graph here, all the way through to the present, and you can see the trend of decline. as fossil fuels have continued to be burned and heat has continued to accumulate in the atmosphere and the ocean system, we have seen this ongoing trend of Arctic sea ice decline. And Arctic sea ice is an essential aspect of our climate system. A loss of Arctic sea ice is very disruptive to a number of things that we all rely on. So please follow Zach and please help him spread the word on Arctic sea ice, and please listen to his fact-based, science-based work and spread it widely. I would also like to just point out this other comment by Zach on April 1st, and he says, "I'm sorry if I missed replying to some of your questions and comments. It's pretty much garbage now in the replies to climate science posts. This started happening to my tweets back in November/December and is becoming more frequent. Now hundreds, perhaps thousands of trolling replies." And I've got to send out my heart to Zach on this. I've been getting trolled by climate change deniers and clean energy deniers for years now. And it does seem that the trolling activities are very widespread. And for me, what I've just done is I block and, if possible, report all of the harassment. And there's really no way to engage with climate denier trolls or those aiming harassment toward you. It's a fraught effort doomed to fail, and the intention of the trolling is only malicious. So basically the only thing you can do about the trolls is to block them. But this is a problem with social media generally, where the purveyors of positive information and those who seek to do positive work get targeted with hate, harassment, and worse, threats of violence for some. And it is very shameful, the targeting of climate scientists with this kind of harassment. And I encourage you not only to support Zach and the other climate scientists as they are harassed by hateful groups and individuals, or those who have, like a monetary special interest who are targeting them with smears. But I also urge you to put social pressure on the social media owners and um, governing boards to have additional moderating tools that prevent this kind of harassment. It is really a direct attack on free speech. Often the trolls claim that they are proponents of free speech, which is total nonsense. If you're out there harassing and bullying people on the internet or spreading misinformation, you are the antithesis of free speech. You are, in fact, a tool of tyranny. And to the social media orgs and companies like Twitter and all the others, this has got to stop. I mean, we're not going to have real freedom or democracy or liberty or even truth if this kind of nonsense continues. All right, so moving on to the next point, I did talk about Arctic sea ice. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the drought. And I've been talking about the California drought for a while, but one of our real major heavyweight experts on water is Peter Gleek, and he put together this amazing thread yesterday that I thought I would share with you on the California drought. So a thread about California's water year. It's April 1st. Today marks the unofficial but traditional end of the wet season in California. It might rain or snow more, but the period of October 1 to April 1 is the standard reporting year. And now, where do we stand? So let's talk about it. We've had very severe storms hammering into California all year. And in some places, we've had record precipitation, record snowfall, record rainfall. But the underlying condition for the US West is still one of drought. And I thought I would just provide for you this in-depth understanding, this in-depth analysis by Peter Gleek. So he says, It certainly seemed like California was raked by an endless series of storms, but in part we've forgotten what it's like to have a lot of winter rain after years of persistent drought. And different parts of the state have different impacts. And here's a comprehensive precipitation map for California for this year, and you can see the water year data based on the average percentages. So, for example, in the purples, you got 200% of average. And in the greens, you've got, 100 to 120. And then in the yellows, and the reds, you actually have a deficit. So there's actually some regions here that have, some deficits, primarily being parts of southeastern California. So, but this does show you where the heavy precipitation occurred and what areas might have not gotten so much precipitation. Peter goes on to say the northern Sierra has received about 60 inches of rain, nowhere near the historically wettest years, but about 134% of average for this state. So above average, but no record year for most of the northern areas. And then the San Joaquin region has also received about 60 inches of rain, again below the wettest years, but substantially above average, about 184% of average for the state. And here you can see the trends in the graph. And then the Talar Basin has received 50 inches of rain, on track to be the wettest year on record and more than double the long-term average for this state. And here you can see the rainfall for this year in the blue, or precipitation this year in the blue, and then um, the previous record in the green. And then Peter goes on to say that the snowpack has been especially remarkable. As of April 1, the statewide snowpack is 235% of average, with an average of 60.6 inches of water equivalent, and especially large amounts in the southern parts of the Sierra. So major snowpacks this year. And then Peter states the reservoirs statewide are filled to around 100% of normal for this date. They're not full because managers must keep flood storage space empty to prepare for melting snow. As those snows melt, you're going to get a lot of excess water flushing down into streams, and so the reservoirs need like a little bit of gap to help manage that water. But they'll certainly be filled when the flood risk drops. Good news for farmers and cities. In the meantime, here's a graph showing the massive amount of water stored in reservoirs and snowpack now. The snowpack is what is causing worries about spring flooding, especially in the San Joaquin Talar region. And bad flooding has already hit some areas. So you can see that's reservoir in the snowpack, which is just huge and resulting in a flooding concern. Finally, the Colorado River remains in severe overdraft, um, with demand exceeding supply. Better than normal precipitation in the Rockies will help a bit. California groundwater also remains in severe overdraft, while some groundwater levels will rise this year. Long-term trends are still down. That will continue until the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act rules take full effect, rebalancing supply and demand. That is likely to require fallowing 500,000 acres to 500,000 to a million acres of farmland, about 12% of California's total. Fin. Okay, so what does this all mean in total? We got a lot of precipitation this year, but the drought is not over for the West. The California is still in a water deficit. The California groundwater is still in a water deficit. And what we are seeing is over the course of a long-term period of systemic drought for the region, flashes of very extreme precipitation. And that is basically on track with what the climate scientists predicted. An amazing analysis here by Peter Gleek. I encourage you to follow him. He is one of our best experts on water. And I'm going to go ahead and like all these posts in his analysis here. Okay, so let's get on to one more thing. I did want to end our preamble here with a positive. It's not liking. Hold on. Like, darn you. There we go. Um, and one of the experts on clean energy that I love to follow is Mark Jacobson. And Mark is just not only is he focused on solutions, he's also focused on making clear how open our pathway is to 100% renewable clean energy and continuously refines studies to this effect while advising policymakers on how to achieve 100% clean energy goals. So I encourage you to follow Mark and promote his work. His work is very good, definitely for the good. He's one of our best experts on the issue of clean energy. But I did want to highlight some information that he has been sharing on his page, which is helpful and optimistic, and it's pointing toward good policy changes for parts of our world. And Mark notes on March 31st that the sun also shines in the north, and Canada is about to give a 30% tax credit for solar, batteries, and wind power. So, wind, solar, and batteries. This will help speed the clean energy transition in Canada. So, good job, Canada. Let's get that solar, batteries, and wind rapidly deployed, and these incentives will definitely help. Um, all right. And then Mark also notes that there's recently been a double-digit growth in heat pump sales. Um, and heat pumps are just a really good way of managing energy. They help to aid efficiency, and they also help to replace gas. Heat pumps are electrified, and when you have an efficient electrified system, not only does it save energy, but you can plug it into clean energy systems like wind and solar, and hydropower, things like that. So yay, good to see the growth in heat pumps. And then last of all, I did recently talk to a friend about cogeneration for crops. Cogeneration, I think I'm getting the term correct, is when you have wind and solar generation on farmlands where the two together have a helpful effect for crops depending on the kind of crops that you choose. And in this particular case, Mark is talking about a specific win-win where building solar photovoltaics at a specific height above the crops can reduce surface temperatures by up to 10 degrees Celsius versus panels on the ground. So the solar panels work to provide protection from the heat for heat sensitive plants and plants that prefer like more diffuse sunlight or a shadier environment. And so you get this win-win in the form of increased farm productivity and in the form of clean energy. And last of all, Mark notes in this post, solar panels handle heat better when they're combined with crops. And so just highlighting some positive moves there. And last of all, I didn't note this in the title, but I did want to highlight Terry Hughes. Terry Hughes is one of the world's top coral experts and is one of the primary critics of the fossil fuel industry. And I think this is spot on. It's not unexpected, but I would call it a sweet irony of history that some of the sharpest critics of the fossil fuel industry are the very climate scientists that the fossil fuel industry has tried, some among the fossil fuel industry have tried to demonize. And Terry Hughes, in reference to um, some statements by politicians and providing criticism, um, saying that they are unfit for public office in the Anthropocene. And it's worth noting that um, you really don't want climate misinformers or those aligned with the fossil fuel industry campaign to disinform the public and block climate action in public office. It is promoting public harm when you have climate change deniers and fossil fueled bad actors in positions of power. They're only going to slow action on climate change and result in more harm down the road. So, indeed, unfit for public office in the present day. All right, so let's get down to the wave report. And I know I've talked a lot about climate science in this session and what the climate scientists are talking about. Haven't gotten into Michael Mann yet. I think I'm going to save that for tomorrow. We'll break up some of the climate science statements in the preambles for this week. But let's get into the weather now. Let's talk about the weather. We're going to talk about the weather. We're going to talk about the waves. We're going to talk about the climate. Right now, we've got a massive front offshore. This was the big storm that caused all those tornadoes in the central U.S. We've got another storm building in the central U.S. I haven't run all the models yet, but bad on me. I'll run the model when we get to it, so you might be surprised. But this one doesn't look as bad as the last one. Let's hope that's the case. Let's hope this one isn't really sucking up a lot of that extra heat from the Gulf and smashing it into the cold and creating all these crazy weather systems. But right now, like just looking at, the wind fields and, based on some of the earlier analysis I did on this system, it doesn't look as bad. You can see the massive frontal system out in the central Atlantic. You've got two big old low pressure systems, one hovering over Newfoundland, the other out here south of Greenland, and a big old high pressure system out there. And here in the Outer Banks, we've got northerly and northwesterly winds. Looking at the geocolor composite, let's go ahead and, yeah. So you can see the feathered clouds of the front heading on offshore. You can see some disturbances over Texas and some in the upper tier of the country, but nothing too bad. Maybe a little bit hovering around the Gulf Coast region and a little bit of an impulse of storminess heading into the Pacific Northwest, although storm season for California appears to be tapering off. Let's look at the enhanced cloud top so we can see some of that storminess running across Texas and the Gulf Coast area. We can see the large frontal boundary offshore rapidly heading to the east. We can see some disturbed weather over the northern portions of the US and a little bit of storminess in the northwest, nothing too crazy. And then looking at the radar and alerts map for the United States, the main things that pop out to me right now are some red flag warnings for the central U.S. This region here, running from Texas through Oklahoma, parts of Kansas, and Colorado are under drought and they're getting strong winds, and that combination increases fire hazards. We do have small craft advisories and gale warnings up for the U.S. West Coast. So probably some big waves out there. And we've got some storminess moving in through the west, and you can also see those showers in along the Gulf Coast region and snows up toward the north, as well as some small craft advisories for the U.S. East Coast as well. All right, so let's get down to our wave report for specific locations for today. Generally, it's choppy, sloppy, 1 to 3 foot waves, north winds. At Jeanette's Pier right now, we've got 1 to 2 foot waves from the official monitor. I was down there earlier. It looked a little bit bigger than 1 to 2 feet, but I don't know. Maybe it is just 1 to 2 feet. Primary swell coming out of the north at 6 seconds has a 3.5 foot swell. And let's go ahead and move in. I'll zoom in a little bit. Yeah, there's Jeanette's Pier. And the secondary swell is coming in at 15 seconds. That's just a 1/2 foot swell. That's coming in out of the east-northeast. Winds are out of the north-northwest, starting to move off toward the west at 19 miles per hour. This should calm down a little bit. Right now, it's a cross-shore flow. Should start to head more offshore as as we progress more and more toward evening. Air temperatures right now 56 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than expected, but still cooler than yesterday. Ocean water temperatures also cooler than yesterday. Those southwesterly gale force winds pushed off the warmer waters and allowed the Labrador current, the colder waters from the Labrador current, to sift on in. Um, And then for today and this evening, it's cooler than yesterday, breezy, sunny for the rest of the afternoon, highs in the mid 50s. Worth noting right now that Bathhouse is seeing 2 to 3 foot waves up here. And but yeah, generally 1 to 2, 2 to 3 foot waves in this region. Heading south past Oregon Inlet, we find that Esterns also has 1 to 2 foot waves. Rodanth Pier is also in the range of 1 to 2 feet, and then at Avon, as we get closer to Hatteras, we also have 1 to 2 foot waves with primary swell coming in out of the south at 8 seconds. That is a 2.5 foot swell. Secondary swell coming in at 7 seconds out of the northeast. That is a 3.5 foot swell. That swell is not lining up very well because we got 1 to 2 foot waves on the sandbars and on the beaches down there at Avon. Winds out of the north-northwest at 21 miles per hour with that southeast cant to the coastline. That is an offshore flow. Air temperatures. And then heading on south to Buxton, we find that the waves are in the range of, whoa, did I do this right? I'm sorry. Yeah, waves in the range of 2 to 3 feet at Buxton with a primary swell coming in out of the north at 7 seconds. Secondary swell coming in out of the south at 8 seconds. The north swell is 5 feet. The secondary swell is 3.5 feet. So you got the swells basically one coming from the north, one coming from the south, and they're wrapping around to produce those 2 to 3 foot waves. Winds are out of the north at 16 miles per hour. That is a cross shore flow. Air temperatures 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Ocean water temperatures 61. Weather conditions for today at Buxton, sunny, cooler, breezy, and highs in the upper 50s. All right, let's get down to some climate and long-term weather discussion. Right now, the global climate system is 0.32 degrees Celsius above the 1981 through 2010 reference period, 5-day running mean, which was already warmer than normal. So globe is warmer than normal today, as it has been. The hotspots are the poles. The Arctic is 0.82 degrees Celsius above normal, and the Antarctic is 1.125 degrees Celsius above normal. As we get into autumn, it appears that the Antarctic here is showing more and more as we get into southern hemisphere autumn, it appears that the Antarctic is showing more and more of a departure from norms. The hotspots across the middle latitudes appear to be running across parts of the US Southwest and Gulf Coast regions. Northwest Africa continues to be warmer than normal. We got large swaths of warmer than normal temperatures across the North Atlantic and large ocean zones. North Asia, much warmer than normal. And this is a concern for fire weather hazard, at least for me. East Asia, also much warmer than normal. Large swath of Australia above normal, and big chunk of South Africa down there above normal as well. Getting into the NOAA quantitative prediction analysis, we do have a tendency for heavy precipitation and possible severe weather running from the Gulf Coast region all the way through the U.S. Southeast just offshore of the Carolinas. This is a little bit interesting to me when I see that big blob of increased precipitation potential offshore. That says to me, hey, maybe there's a nor'easter potential. We'll have to see. Um, Looking at the near-term forecast, it just looks like weather conditions are expected to be like warmer than normal. I haven't really noticed anything crazy when it comes to storms, but we'll look at the global forecast system model and see what's up. And then for the Northwest, looks like some pretty heavy precipitation for Washington and Oregon, but California looks like it gets left out as the change to the dry portion of the year begins to ensue. Now let's look at the Climate Prediction Center, and I did want to just look at the drought monitor. I did talk about how the drought in the central US is also affecting fire weather there, and that is the region right now of the US that is under the most intense drought. but it is worth noting that we still have drought for large portions of the U.S. West, despite heavy precipitation this winter. All right, and let's look at the 1 month outlook for precipitation and temperature. And for the US East and South, it is expected to be warmer to much warmer than normal, below normal temperatures for parts of the US West, above normal precipitation predicted for parts of the Gulf Coast near Texas and Louisiana and up near the Great Lakes region. Global tropical weather hazards indicate a potential for did we get an update? I'm just checking that. No, we did not. Still, we haven't had really an update yet, but still a potential for a tropical cyclone formation to the north and west. I'm sorry, yep, north and west of Australia. We're gonna do more regarding. Let's see. Let's get back to the Storm Prediction Center and update this. I'm sorry, I did not update this. So the convective outlook, is this for April 2nd? Yeah. Convective outlook for today shows some enhanced risk of severe weather. Wow. For parts of Texas and Oklahoma. So for those of you guys in the enhanced risk area, please stay alert to the potential for severe thunderstorms, possible tornadic thunderstorms as well. So it does look like we've got some severe weather potential for today. And then for tomorrow, we've got a risk of thunderstorms ranging from the Gulf Coast all the way up to the Great Lakes region. Nothing too crazy, but still the potential. So please stay alert. And then for Tuesday, starting to look pretty gnarly again. So looks like we might get some severe weather by Tuesday again for parts of the central U.S. to include Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, and with a larger swath of potential for thunderstorms ranging from the Texas and Louisiana Gulf coasts all the way up to the Great Lakes region. And also here in the Outer Banks, some chance of thunderstorms as well. We are getting into the springtime when the severe weather threatens, but we've also got some climate crisis fingerprints on the present troubles. Namely, the very warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico help to fuel storminess, and we have a general increased intensity of evaporation over the land surface, gosh, that helps to fuel storm formation. Okay, let's get into the forecast models. I did not look at the forecast models early before I did this, so bad on me. So you and I are going to learn what is predicted in the global forecast system model for the United States together. And for today, it looks like we get some severe weather firing across parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and northern Louisiana, with a storm system developing in the central US. And then as we get into the day on Tuesday, looks like we get a low pressure starting to form, sweeping out of the Rockies, tapping into that Gulf moisture, and then developing a rather large frontal boundary to the south of it, stretching from Texas all the way to the Great Lakes region. I want to look at the mesoscale models. Let's get down to 12 kilometer. Yeah, so you can see this line of thunderstorms in this model on, let's get back to, yeah, so it looks like as we get into the day on Tuesday and late in the day on Tuesday, early in the day on Wednesday, this potential for severe weather with a line of thunderstorms developing from Texas through Minnesota and then sweeping eastward. So we will just have to see how that develops. Let's get back to the GFS model. And you can also see those storms firing in the GFS composite on Wednesday. And then sweeping in through parts of the US East. Looks like the storminess, looks like we have some potential for storminess on Wednesday running from Texas through the central Appalachians in Virginia. And then more potential storminess as we get into Friday with a storm front stalling off toward the south and then turning into a bit of a warm front I'm curious about potential nor'easter formation. There's a bit of a low here. This on Monday, a week from now. It doesn't look too intense. Wow. And then another front sweeps on through. Of course, we're into grain of salt territory. 981 millibars. Wow, that is a strong low predicted for the Northeast, but we're 977. Holy cow. Yeah. So potential strong low pressure forming following week. But again, we're in grain of salt territory. I don't see anything in the way of nor'easters. Um, so what we do have is a lot of risk for severe weather for large regions of the central and southern US. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that. And for those of you who are in the central and southeastern US, please pay attention to your local emergency management and your local weather experts. If severe weather does threaten, please seek shelter and take steps to preserve life and property. Life first, always. In any case, let's get down to the wave forecast and let's make sure we are at now because I look at these models all the time. Okay, and let's look at the measure in feet. And right now we've got wave heights in the near offshore environment in the range of about 5 feet. Because the swell is coming primarily directly from the north or directly from the south, we don't have great lineup for waves, which is why we're getting those 1 to 3 foot waves. I do want to note that there are big waves out here, but most of them are heading off toward Europe, which is kind of a bummer for me, but that's just the way of things. And then as we get into the day tomorrow, the swell for the near offshore environment does tamp down, although it does orient more toward the coast coming in from the east and southeast for most beaches. So hopefully tomorrow will be a better wave day, certainly a warmer day, and hopefully a better wave day as well. And then on Tuesday, the swell orients more toward the east with 2.5 to 3 foot waves, 2.5 to 4 foot waves in the near offshore environment. Looks like Tuesday might be a better day for some beaches. I don't know. We might go on safari and go somewhere fun on Tuesday. We'll see. I'm going to do all the research and try and take you guys with me on a nice surf trip. And then into Wednesday, looks like the swell kind of, I don't know. Does this mean the swell peters out? Looks like we've got southeast swell in the range of 3 feet. So I don't know. Some beaches might be good with this, but nonetheless, relatively small swell. And then into Thursday, do we have a Thursday? Yes, we do. Southeast swell continues Thursday morning with 3.5 foot swell, but generally 3 foot swell in the near offshore environment. And I do want to show you where the storminess is out here in the central Atlantic. Some of the wave heights are starting to fall down across the pond over in Europe. We are getting out of the stormy time for the North Atlantic. I mean, it still can be stormy in springtime, but not as stormy as it is in wintertime. And then I did want to show you Jeffreys Bay out here with wave heights toward the end of the period in the range of 7 feet. Let's see what they are now. And right now we've got that Southern Ocean pumping out those big waves in the range of about 8 feet in the near offshore environment at Jeffreys Bay. And one last thing, I did want to talk about one thing that we do have in common with our friends in South Africa, and it is the sharks. We have great white sharks off the U.S. East Coast. And most of the time, we don't really hear about great white sharks for the U.S. East Coast because the great whites don't tend to bother people on the U.S. East Coast. They tend to stay offshore, and I'm gonna have to knock on wood because I hope I'm not cursing it for anybody. Um, there's a famous series of attacks that occurred way back at the start of the 20th century, but just generally speaking, here on the East Coast, we don't tend to have issues with great white sharks. And right now, the ocean monitoring system tracking some great whites off of Hatteras. We've had a lot of sensationalization in the press about Breton, for example, which is 1,400 plus pound great white shark that's in the 13.3 foot range. And the last radio sonde I think found him. Let's see if we can find Breton. Yep, here's Breton. just off of Avon, about 10 to 12 miles off of Avon. He's let's see. I keep getting frosty. Here we go. The last locational data was on March 28th. But yeah, he's a big boy at 13 feet 3 inches, 1,437 pounds. And that's so we've got these sharks out here, but they tend to ply the waters of the Gulf Stream. That's where most of the food is for them. Occasionally here in the Outer Banks, we'll get some seals that come in close to shore. I did hear reports of seals off Oregon Inlet. Um, and I mean, white sharks do feed on seals. So, I mean, if we get seals in the water close to shore, I wouldn't recommend swimming. That would not be a good thing to do. But I mean, unless it's one of those kinds of situations, I think everyone's going to be fine with the sharks. I'm gonna have to knock on wood now. But I am wearing a thing called a shark bands. It's a shark deflector device, and extra insurance. A buddy of mine loaned it to me, so mea culpa to my friend Sean. Thank you for looking out for me. Um, yeah, but nonetheless, sharks are our friends too. They do help to keep the oceans in balance and healthy. So we love our shark friends, right? Okay, so that'll be it for the OBX wave report for today. We did discuss a lot of waves, weather, and climate stuffs. And at the end, as I always do, I'm just going to ask you guys to please do everything you can to help speed the deployment of clean energy, to tamp down the use of fossil fuels as rapidly as possible, and thereby save our beautiful coastlines from the impacts of climate change, which are driven by fossil fuel burning, and these impacts being increasingly severe storms, the rising sea levels due to the melting of the land ice and the thermal expansion of the ocean, and the acidification of the ocean, which ruins our coral reefs, as well as the warming of the ocean itself, which is the main trigger for the coral bleaching events. So thank you for joining me again. I will be back with you